But I'm going to show you how this is possible tonight, okay? Very briefly. To just give you the awareness that there's a part of the system that functions very similar to how a battery functions. And when that part of the system has a high charge to it, if you want to use that terminology, it then activates quite a few different abilities in the matrix. You don't get just one ability. One, the body is on a charge, so when you're asleep, you're not even really asleep. The body can't be, what you really are can't be contained by the body. Let's put it that way. The being you are is once you go to sleep and the body lays down, quote unquote, the guard, you're out, you're flying. And we mentioned that before, that was the natural process of even what we would say is death, is that you would go through living life, building chi, working with your yin, working with your yang. And then as you got older, your chi would be so large, what they used to call the dragon, that you were just waiting to get out of this thing. And you literally, I had another video, I didn't bring it tonight, but there's another video where you see the master choose to die. He's already like sitting in his 80s, 90s or something like that. Who knows how old he was? And he was there with the crew. And they got some exclusive footage, and basically this master chose to die right then. And then it took him only a moment to remove his own life, and then they carried him out of there, and that was over. And where do you think he goes? Do you think that it's over for him? And this is what we really also need to focus on, is that life is not over when we leave here. So if we keep getting distracted, especially with the divisions, and we never really level up, then we, at best repeat, if not come back degenerated or broke in some way. Not just broke monetarily, but the current generator is broke. Okay, and this is what we need to kind of address this evening, is that this is the reason why we meditate, because we have a current generator in our body. Now, in the US and most of the Uniteds, they have technically magnets for this kind of power, meaning that when you're in a matrix and you have this kind of power, you become a magnet. Like, you see how many people are around? This is like being famous, which many people that are famous say they hate being famous. Like, keep it out. Like, this is the main thing I noticed with famous people is they say, like, even they did an interview with Sam Altman just recently. He said, the only thing, like, I knew I was going to become a member or the head of this big company that was going to be so disruptive to the world, blah, blah, creating OpenAI, etc. But the only thing that I didn't prepare for, that nobody really could have prepared me for, was becoming famous. Because now, you got to really watch your back. Some people like you, some people don't. Everybody's on you. This is a whole different kind of life. Most of us never experience it, right? But at the end of the day, is that really what you want? Because see, in our society, it has learned how to take people who even naturally have these powers, because we all have them, and then put them in the light to be drained, if you may, for enough time to where their shine or their magnetism, especially if it's not being cultivated, dulls out. Then they can't perform the miracle. Because it was notating, as I was going through Sybil and I was continuing to question it about Madame Blavatsky's life, it was notating that actually Madame Blavatsky early on in her life did have some psychic powers. But these powers began to wane, and then that's when the shenanigans started. And that actually is another pattern that you should always be aware of, is that sometimes when a person is just living on their power or just living on their trick or whatever they can do, when they can't do that anymore for whatever reason, if they get into that despair because they haven't figured out where they need to move on to next, now they got to even pretend that they can do it. Okay, so this is one thing that we also notice within, let's say, spiritual communities where there is like a leader, if you may, and we won't call out any names, right? And let's say this leader has these spiritual powers, right? But generally those spiritual powers, that leader will not readily just readily go and try to teach others those spiritual powers in these modern communities. They will use it as their way to be like special amongst everybody else. And they'll bathe in that. And that is super dangerous, right? That gets you your nature boys, basically. It's super dangerous to have the Kundalini completely risen and open and be in that first neophyte stage, not get the right kind of cultivation around you, and then actually get people who now are like still feeling that you have something going on. And this is why we see a lot of people that get abused, because some of these ayahuasca servers, right now, everybody's an ayahuasca server. They go give the tea to other people because they want to take them through that experience first. And then when that person has that experience, they look at that person that gave them that tea and they're like, oh my goodness, this is like the person who opened my eyes. This is the person that is like powerful to me. And of course, when their eyes first open, if you're there and they see you and they see the radiance around you, because we all have a radiant field around us, right? It's just, what are those colors? But when they see that, it's, oh my goodness, this person, they're not seeing themselves generally, especially if that person is like an egomaniac, right? They're seeing this other person like, oh my goodness, it's like a god. And then they're just kind of like stuck, right? And I'm telling you, this stuff is happening all the time. And actually, while I'm like watching some of this stuff going on, especially with some of these communities that are even around here, I'm like, I don't want to be around. I'm not going to be associated. I'm not going to be involved, because even the master knows what they're doing. Just as I would know what I was doing if I was doing that, the master knows enough. You have an internal bearing that is telling you when you're getting off track and you're now falling into the path of one of those people that you probably already read about, or you already probably seen their story. Because again, these patterns are all over the place. So it really becomes whether you want to fall into the pattern or not. And so this is why I'm saying you gird yourself in these points, because now I'm going to show you why I feel, again, that spirituality and science did connect in certain sanctums already, but as a whole still remains separate, which is keeping most people dumb to the obvious. Let me show you.
When an isolated container is filled with a uniform layer of fog and then given sufficient enough voltage, something fascinating happens.
I really hope this is showing up on camera.
It's haunted me so much that I knew I had to dig deeper, gather opinions from other professionals, and run simulations which painted an incredible picture of what's happening.
I have to say, there isn't a tremendous amount of scientific literature on the topic. Quite frankly, I found very little. And it may have real-world applications. So this is a deeper dive into one of the strangest phenomenons I've ever seen: high-voltage nebulography. You know, high-voltage physics opens an entire sandbox of beautiful phenomenon. It's why I've created an entire channel around it.
I've shot videos on electrostatic firebending, water bending, electrostatic levitation, self-healing fractal patterns.
But when I saw this fog phenomenon, it completely broke my brain and left lasting questions.
Asking viewers for what their hot take on what the cause was, the explanations ranged from capacitive effects to electron gun scenarios.
Luckily, this effect is extremely easy to reproduce.
This includes a large flat container filled with warm water, lots of it actually, a physical separator on one side that has a gap at the end like so, a piece of dry ice, and a low current, high voltage DC power supply. This 20 kilovolt battery powered Wimshurst is ideal because, as you can see, totally harmless. The electrical ground is attached directly to the water and the high voltage positive to your body.
The key here is low current, less than a milliamp, which is completely safe in this application. Now, as for voltage, I found anywhere from 5 to 30 kilovolts works great.
Once the dry ice is dropped into the water, the separator allows the CO2 fog to flow throughout the container, forming a uniform sheet. And at this point, the power can be turned on and the magic starts. The trails range from hair thin to somewhat thicker, as seen here, and even really wide, unpredictable bursts. Actually, quite unpredictable. Your finger can draw on the fog from over a foot away. It really is something beautiful. Perhaps the most intriguing of all, though, a flat palm placed just over the fog.
Oh my God.
Creates a clear vortex.
Okay, so I know there was no sound on the Zoom side, so I'm going to explain this, but did you see something familiar? So let me explain this to you just from just the dynamics of what I've come to also experience with my energy centers, and then also messing around with electronics and also messing around with magnets. Okay. So it turns out that the body has another gear, right? So you can add energetic potential to the body, right? But the body is also, it has all of these orifices. And in many ways, if these orifices are not closed at certain times, then you can't really store the energy, right? So there's basically more ways for a person to leak energy than it is for them to actually, well, you just say there's a lot of ways for a person to leak energy. Like they can leak energy out of their dantian, right? And they can leak energy out of basically where their anus is. Like you can leak energy also from the radiance of your brain. Like when your neurons start firing, especially when you're angry, you naturally give off BTU, which is like a British thermal unit measurement of heat coming from your body. You also have an electromagnetic field, as you know, not only the one called the aura, but also the one that creates static and harvests static from the environment, right? So everything around you is rich with energy, but there's also so many ways for you to be drained of energy when you start topping off. Because see, that's where the discipline comes in. It's like when you have a lot of energy, it's like having a lot of money, not wasting all of that energy and wasting all of that money, or poorly investing that energy and that money, or poorly investing the energy like you would be poorly investing money into whatever it is that energy is going into. But these phenomena that you're looking at, and this is why it's important to see this, because they conducted a scientific experiment about a phenomena that was occurring, but also because they lacked that spiritual component, they weren't able to go that next step to realize that what this device, which is called let me just put this on the screen here, electrostatic generator, which you would have a couple of them in class, but this one's built a little bit different, but you can see it's running on 2 AA's. And just the simple driver of that energy into the body sprays the energy out of the fingers and sprays the energy out of the palms the same way Buddy's spraying the energy right here. Let's just go to the end right here, right? So that was that same movement, because now what you have in the body is you have a buildup of this energy and a buildup of this force.
When an isolated container is filled with a uniform...
There we go. So you have a buildup of this energy and a buildup of this force, but you can see that even when we're saying, hey, spirals come out of the hand, right? This was something that, you would even be looked at crazy for, like, yo, I got power and energy coming out of my hand. Now, of course, anybody that has worked with Qigong and Neigong and things like this, they know of a little bit of this even, right? But we're seeing like clear examples that you could take to the kids and be like, look, you have energy coming off your body, right? Because even though this is, you're running a direct voltage into the body, right? So in this way, like Dynamo Jack says, it's not electricity, it's chi. So this is not necessarily the energy that is the healthiest for the body, but it shows you just when energy is driven into the body, where the energy comes out, okay? So when we mix that, it gives us a lot of awareness. It gives us the awareness that, hey, could there be a human charger? Could, we potentially draw, basically, could we cut ether with that force? Because that's what you realize what happens next, is that if you have that kind of flow coming off of your finger, right? And then you literally can cut the portal open, if you like Dr. Strange or whatever, if you had the chi power, if you had enough chi force. And what I'm trying to explain to everybody is chi force is depleted in division. Like when I first came through my experience, I couldn't even touch there was a sink there. Touching both sides of the sink with water in them caused a horrendous shock when I touched both of those at the same time. You never did that again. It was extremely painful. You were carrying this charge, but you knew people wanted this charge. I swear, it was like something you naturally knew. And that's what being in that state does, is it puts you in a state of knowing. And as I said before, this is also what you see in people who they come into enlightenment. And that's why I say enlightenment produces polymorphs. So while they may not know exactly how to explain what they're explaining, and they may not they may have just even used the integers that they have been given to explain what it is that the experiences that they're going through is about, right? But in truth, after give them about 10, 15 years, they're going to come into something totally different if they can just maintain. And that maintaining is, of course, when you hit initiate, let's say, it already starts setting in where you see where you were wrong. And you learn to accept being wrong. You start to enjoy it. You start to be glad that you made mistakes and bad assumptions about certain things, because some of those things were standing right in your way from getting on to the next level. And as I said before, if there's any kind of enemy or any kind of opponent, they must be eliminated within the mind and in the consciousness, or thus they would stand in the way of your own very progress. So they must be dissolved. And the easiest way that they're dissolved is in the awareness that all is self in different stages and times and forms of metamorphosis. And what you're here to do is you're here to actually create some of those bridges between certain states of consciousness, maybe not all of them, while also not getting yourself compromised energetically because you've entered into a power struggle. If you ever plan on cutting holes through the ether in order to pass through portals, having enough charge to be able to ascend, this means there's a certain amount of thrust that the spirit body, if you may, needs to make longer journeys. But if all that's being burned up in something that you think this is so petty that it doesn't have anything to do with your power and your energy. And see, the thing is that this is why in this world, there are things that you can be given, like beauty, that also can even become a direct hindrance to your growth because everybody else is looking at how beautiful you are. This is what we have to realize what's going on in the matrix, is that it's easy for a person to spend so many lifetimes here getting degraded that they become completely unaware of their power. And then they can't go anywhere beyond this. They can't imagine anything beyond this. And the energy starts residing just on that low state. And then a person must make their home. Because see, like in the law of alchemy, you know that one of the major laws that exists is the law of polarity. So you would automatically know that if there was a high God, if you may, that there was a low God, right? And then you start realizing how this world, if you really look at it, it's been deep in deception and lies for so long. It's filthy. If it wasn't for nature, there would almost be nothing great to see, including how humans treat each other. And, you know, again, when you're wise, just how many people are not really genuine, how they're still stuck in the childish, like inferiority complexes and all that stuff, and how it sticks right out. But remember, there's another faction that they encourage that because they can capitalize on that. They don't have to be afraid of anybody who operates like that. So learn from the knowledge today, but let's go ahead and open it up. I got one final thing here, is to understand that. So we had two sides of things that need to be checked. In spirituality, people needed to be checked with even something like science, because too many people started thinking that you couldn't quantify what was really going on spiritually. Like when I go into a high vibration, I can hear the ringing in my ear and I can measure that ring and I can tell you the frequency that I'm on. A change happened there. I can measure that change and I can give you that number. Also, as you see here, if I say, hey, you got energy and power coming right from your hands, you just need to make sure that you stay charged up. And remember, when you're laying hands on somebody, that power and that energy is coming from your hands. It's so powerful, it can even set things on fire. So all your little Dragon Ball Z ideas and Yu-Gi-Oh! And all of this were real. But it still requires that if you're going to go into that discipline, the first thing is to not be listening to everybody else, because they are not initiated yet. See, that's the thing about initiation. Initiation only means they haven't seen it yet. They haven't seen the power. So if you're talking to an uninitiated person and you're telling them that you can float, then that's not going to be something they can digest. Also, you don't really see people float on TV, because what it takes to do that is already in itself, like as an adept, you understand that that power, that's not what it's for. And using it that way is almost like a one-way ticket to what you would start seeing when people start getting a lot of energies around them, and then their forces start being technically drained, right? It's kind of like the more you tell people about some power or something that you have going on that's special, the less you can actually be able to do it after a while. I call it the normalization. It seems like the Matrix wants you to normalize. So you can even start taking a supplement and be flying through the roof, and then take the same supplement like a few days later and it does nothing. What happened? Why is the body normalizing? I had a talk with Finn about this, and we came to the conclusion, to stay on the balance note, that normalization is needed, because if you go into a high vibration, you need to normalize to that. Like, you go into a high vibration, you'd just be sitting there with your eyes wide open and not even able to function and move and do anything if your body didn't say, oh, okay, let's turn down the governor. Let's get less fluid going in here. Let's do that. Let's try to normalize this experience, so that way, we don't just blow this thing up, right? So your body has these automatic systems like that. But those same automatic systems make it like you're always trying to get more in the meditation. You're always trying to breathe more and do more in order to keep your energy field sustained, when not necessarily realizing at times that you are sustained, you're just normalized. Now you're a powerful being, still in the matrix, still in the physical reality, but not of the physical reality in that way. You see? So this is the maxims. But when you get into the, hey, let me show everybody this power and let me show you how to do this, then, obviously there's a huge thing that, especially in the past, that was then set up for you to deal with, because then people were going to thrust you on their shoulders. People weren't going to understand really the power that you were able to have. People were going to insist that you were in some type of cult. Even people that were powerful would feel threatened by you. All those kind of things were going to be a part of your projection and a part of your reality if something like that happens, and it's not time. But now what I'm also saying is times change. Now we have science, as I mentioned, and spirituality at their peaks.